Okay, we are back with another episode of Between the Pages Book Chat, and today our guest is author Jeff Chapman, and he's here to talk about his dark fantasy series, The Merliss Tales, which is very interesting. And I'm going to turn it over to him now and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Okay, I'm Jeff Chapman. I studied as a historian in computer science. So during the day, I write software, and at night, I write fantasy when I should be sleeping. Um, I like dark chocolate. I love cats, and I live in a house with more bookshelves than bookshelf space. I mean, with more books than bookshelf space.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers have that problem.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, yes, and the dark chocolate has won my heart as a chocoholic. So give everyone an overview of the book series. What's it about?
Okay. The main character is the spirit of a young woman who's been cast into the body of a cat, and essentially she lives as a cat. She's a small gray cat called Merliss, and the magic that put her into the cat's body gives her a life of thousands of years. So I can basically write stories about Merliss forever, and that was part of the reason I did the series this way. Um, so the first book I have so far in the series is called The Great Contagion, and this centers around when a plague comes to the area in which she's living. I did not come up with this after COVID came around. I came up with this before COVID, so it just happened to be published like months before the COVID pandemic started. Um, so in this case, she also lives with some healers who work on healing people and also battling malevolent creatures that come around. Um, And in this case, she tries to help them find a cure for the disease. But at one point, the people of the village decide that cats are the cause of the disease, and Merlis becomes the target of an angry mob. Also, all the other cats in the village become target of an angry mob. Then the next book in the series is Cat She. This deals with the case of when cat she's come to the area, and this is going to be part of a 3-book series. I've only written the first one so far, but the other 2 are in the works.
So I take it the cat she is a got some Celtic mythology mixed in with there.
Yes, yeah. So they
Yes.
come from a different area into the area where Merlis is living.
Okay. So what time period does the book series take place in? It sounds like it's a historical.
Right. Right now, these 2 books are essentially a medieval period. I'm working on a new one right now called The Breath of the Sea, which is more of a Victorian period. So Merlis is the same character, but now in the next one, there'll be all new human characters, since it'll be multiple centuries after the first couple books.
That's interesting. I like that the you can shift and skip, and you can have prequels and all sorts of different ideas with that concept is
Yeah.
good. Anyway, and one of our viewers has a comment. She said, "This is for cat lovers and fantasy fans for sure." And I
Yes.
definitely agree with that.
Definitely.
Okay, so what were your inspirations and your reasons for writing the series?
Um, well, this was inspired by a cat who showed up at our house one day. She was sick, starving. We took her to the vet. We thought they'd have to put her down, but she just needed TLC and some antibiotics. So after taking her to the vet, we had a new cat. Her name was Smokey. She was a very old cat. She had some battle scars on her. Also, she had lost a couple of her teeth. So she was really sweet, though. So we had her for a couple years. Um, this gave me the idea of an old cat or an old soul in a cat's body, and that sparked the idea, and Merlis came about.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Merlis. Is the spirit controlling the cat, or is it the cat and the spirit working together? How does that go about?
It's mainly the spirit controlling the cat, but of course, the cat's instincts play a role in how Merlis acts. Essentially, she lives as a cat, so she chases mice, chases rats. Also, she has the ability to do some magic. She can also talk to other magical creatures, and she can, of course, talk to other cats and animals. There are a couple other magical creatures that appear regularly. There are two pukas. One's Slynid, who likes to take the form of a stoat, and then the other's Dewinner, who takes the form of a pony living on the moors. Let's see, what else? What else did you ask me? I'm sorry, I think I
I
got off
just
track.
asked you, what kind of personality
Okay. Yeah, I haven't written the origin story yet, so that's something I have to write. But originally, Merliss was a girl studying to be a shaman. And then because of a conflict she had with her mentor, she ended up being cast into the cat. So
okay,
she
doesn't
started out wanting to be a shaman. So that's why she
okay,
knows some magic and healing abilities.
okay, doesn't sound like a very good mentor, but
Has to be conflict to be a story. So,
okay, so you obviously have some magic in the world. So is this like sort of based on Celtic magic, or is it have some other folklore pulled into it as well?
yeah, I've drawn some magic from Celtic folklore. Of course, I have the pukas involved, and they're shapeshifters. And then Merliss's magic has to do with let's see, how would I describe this? She has to find areas where there's some magic involved, like an area of an old battlefield or something like that. Also, using her blood, she can generate some power from that. And a lot of times it involves her going into kind of a trance where she leaves her body and weaves different bits of magic together to create a spell.
It's sort of like
It's,
a
it's
spiritual based sort of thing.
yes. Hmm.
Okay, so what kind of settings? What country basically? What I'm saying is that you're setting. Are you doing like typical European medieval? Are you doing British medieval, or are you mixing it
Um,
up?
It's the area has a moor. It's essentially has water around three sides of a peninsula. There are forests as well. So probably Cornwall would be the best thing that you could relate it to.
Okay, so this is a separate world setting then. It's not like based
Yeah,
in our.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I just use a real world setting as the basis, and then I modified it to fit my needs.
okay. So this fantasy world. So is your setting based on like kingdoms or government or provincial things, or what sort of government do they have?
Okay. Um, right in the let's see. In the Great Contagion, the area in which Merlis lives in had been taken over by a neighboring kingdom. So they essentially been occupied for quite a while. And because of the disease that comes about, it weakens the system. So they end up no longer being taken over by that group that had been in control of them. So they're kind of essentially after that book, they don't really have an overlord for the time. So it's more like local lords are trying to develop a power structure.
Interesting. Okay, so what was the hardest scene or type of scene that you wrote in the series?
Wow. One of my favorite scenes, I don't know if it was the hardest one, but it was actually one of my favorite ones to write, was when she met with one of the old gods. She met with an old god from the forest who tried to explain to her something about what was going on with the disease.
Okay, so I was going to ask you what your favorite scene to write was,
Oh, okay.
but do you have difficulties writing any type of scenes, like say action scenes versus dialogue scenes, or things like that?
Let's see. Probably the hardest scenes to write is when there's mostly a lot of dialogue and I'm trying to get an idea across. I worry about if I just have a whole lot of dialogue that's going to come across as boring. So I guess those are probably the hardest ones to write because you have to, try to make the dialogue as interesting as possible, even though there isn't a lot of action to maybe interest someone.
Okay, so what about your secondary characters? Do you have any of those that stand out or try to steal the scenes from the cat?
Yes, Slynid is that. Slynid's one of the pukas who takes the form of a stoat. Um, he's one of those characters that I just came up with on the spur of the moment as I was beginning the book. And I didn't anticipate him having a big role, but he kept demanding to appear. So he wound up taking a very large role in the book, and he appeared probably about half the book he shows up in and plays a major role.
Yeah, yeah, and traditionally pugas are a bit of a trickster vibe to them.
Mhm.
Um, so is he like that, or is he more helpful, and or does he like to mix things up a little bit?
Well, the pukas all have their own agenda. So, Slynid likes Merliss quite a bit, but he keeps trying to talk her into leaving the world and going and live in Fairy, but Merliss wants to stick around. So, yeah, they have their own agenda, so they're not always gonna do what you want them to do.
And so your supernatural elements have their own world as well, do they?
Yeah, there's a world of Fairy. I haven't explored that in the book yet, but I plan to explore it in another some of the stories.
Okay, so what is your main character afraid of?
Um, what's she afraid of? That's a good question. Probably afraid of losing she set up this life for herself where she lives with these healers and, serves the populace in the way she had wanted to serve the populace when she wanted to become a shaman. So I think what she's worried about is the people losing faith in the old ways such that she's not going to be able to fulfill the the goals that she wanted to fulfill during her life.
Okay, are you going to explore that idea in the Victorian setting? Because if you're
Yes.
going more towards Victorian, there's definitely moving from the old ways there.
Yes, yes. That's one of the things I'm exploring in that one.
Oh, that sounds interesting. So, if you were going to hang out with one of your characters from your books in real life, which one would it be?
Definitely Merliss. I wouldn't wanna hang out with the Pukas because you don't know what they're gonna do.
No, no, I wouldn't think pukas are very trustworthy.
It'd be interesting, but I don't know if it would be a good interesting or not.
So, would you hang out with Merlis as a cat or as more of a magical creature?
Well, I know she's a magical creature, so I'd have to hang out with her as a magical creature. Um, yeah, she doesn't like to be just treated as a cat.
Interesting. So, of course, you've written fantasy, but are you planning on exploring, or would you like to explore other genres in future?
Yeah, I have written in other genres. Let's see, I wrote a Victorian Gothic, like, several years ago. Um, and then I'm interested in doing some, like, mystery set in a steampunk type of environment.
Oh, yeah,
Uh
that's what I'm currently writing.
Oh, okay.
Although it's a paranormal mystery, so
Mhm.
it's a little heavier on the paranormal than the mystery, but
Yeah, and I've written some ghost stories as well, so I'm
yeah,
not just tied to fantasy.
yeah. So, would you ever consider exploring, say, something like horror?
Yeah, I've written some short stories that would be classified as horror as well. So,
Okay, so can you give us a sneak peek on anything that's coming up with the Merliss Tales? Without spoilers, of course.
okay. So the next novel is The Breath of the Sea. Um, the what happens here is a mermaid is washed up on shore, and an old fisherman finds her and takes her home. He has a daughter who is dying of consumption, so they decide to take care of the mermaid who has a broken arm. So they put her in a wash tub. Um, but then the fisherman gets the idea that maybe there's some money he can get from this mermaid, and he might be able to use the money to pay to send his daughter someplace where she might be able to get a cure for her consumption. So Merlis finds out that the mermaid has, shown up and been taken into to be cared for. Um, Merliss believes that they need to take the magical creature and put it back into the sea, or else bad things were likely to happen to the people of the village. Um, but the fisherman, wants to try to get money for the mermaid. So therein lies the conflict between sending the mermaid back or, getting money from the mermaid.
Sounds interesting.
Mhm.
So I think we'll wrap the interview up here. And I'd like to thank you for being our guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Yes, thanks for having me. I loved it.
Okay. And between the pages, we'll be back next weekend with another author. So join us then. And that's all for now. Bye.
Bye.